Rev up your engines!
Well, the U.S. debt has now topped $34 trillion. It's never been this high. And as one economist says, we're beginning a new year, but our national debt remains on the same damaging and unsustainable path. So this is an all-time high, and it's not like it all of a sudden came out. It's been going this way for quite some time. For example, at the end of 2022, the national debt was 97% of the gross national product. So what's happening is, see, the government just keeps borrowing money, right? They can't keep taxing. People don't have the money to pay the taxes, right? So they are borrowing money. And of course, the problem is now the interest rate is up. They love for the last decade and a half borrowing money at almost no interest at all. Oh, wow, look, we'll just keep borrowing. And all they had to pay back was a tiny bit of interest. It wasn't much, or they didn't touch the principal. The principal just keeps growing. And now the whole thing has gotten out of hand, and it's over $34 trillion. The payments of the interest alone, which are $475 billion in the fiscal year 2022, they think now by 2032, it's going to be $1.4 trillion in just the interest payments. They're not paying any of the principal down, right? The principal as it stands now is $34 trillion in debt, right, that they borrow. They just keep borrowing, like they never have to pay it back, right? It's gotten kind of insane. There's no logic behind any of it other than they say, the government's bankrupt, so, okay, we'll shut the government down. They never do. They always move it like a year, 6 months ahead, and then when that time comes, they just keep raising it, and that's why it's gotten so big. People are spending money they don't have, and they just keep borrowing money. Well, in regular world, you and me, if we keep borrowing money like that, guess what? Nobody's going to loan us any money anymore. But this is the government, so they look all over the world and borrow money wherever they can. Right? Who knows? If none of it ever gets paid back, there's going to be a gigantic rat's nest as time goes on. The only problem is it's so complex, nobody can really say what's actually going to happen. Yeah, the Chinese loaned us a bunch of money. If they called it in and we went bankrupt and we don't pay them off, then they get nothing out of that. They basically want to sell us a bunch of stuff. So as long as we keep buying the stuff that they're making, now they're happy. It is a gigantic rat's nest. I mean, in China now, their housing industry is starting to fall apart. Things just can't keep going up forever. And that's the problem with the capitalist idea. And even though they call it communist China, it's really a capitalist dictatorship. The problem with capitalism is it always thinks you got to keep growing. They got to decide you can't keep growing forever because there's a limit to the size of anything, right? That's why the stock market is a giant crash. Then it goes back up and it blows up and there's a giant crash, right? You can't just keep borrowing money because eventually it's going to blow up and crash. Well, here's a hilarious one from Burbank, California. Person put up a video, and they showed that it was 11:35 at night. All the electric chargers were full, and there was a line of about 25 cars waiting to use it. Yeah, you'll be there till 3, 4 in the morning, right? I mean, and this is in California where supposedly they have, the best amount of electrical chargers for cars on the road. No, there isn't. There's no infrastructure for that stuff. Even in California, them pushing this stuff on us is getting to be ridiculous, saying, oh yeah, we're all going to drive electric cars. There's no infrastructure for them. The point that they're trying to push people to buy things that there isn't an infrastructure for. It just doesn't make any sense. But of course, anything the government does generally doesn't make sense. There are a bunch of politicians, lawyers living in the ivory tower thinking, oh, here's what we should do. No, there's things that need to be done. And if you think you should do something and it doesn't work out, you should change your plan of operation. And they're not. If you saw that thing that I did a few weeks ago, the government has given like $2.9 billion to make electrical chargers, and in the last 2.5 years since that bill was passed, not a single charger has been built with this government money, not even one. So don't listen to their nonsense. Well, Toyota's decided to axe hydrogen-powered fuel cell cars in favor of battery-powered cars. Now, they were the first ones to really make an actual hydrogen car. The Toyota Mirai, the guys on Top Gear said, hey, it was the best car we ever had, but we have to get rid of it. And why? Because there's no place you can buy hydrogen at, right? And if there isn't an infrastructure, there's no sense in pursuing it any further. Technology's there. They know how it works. They build cars that run on it, but there isn't hydrogen infrastructure, right? Toyota is working on their battery cells. They're trying to get solid state. Who knows if that'll ever happen? But it looks like they're realizing, well, hydrogen is an interesting idea, but since there's no infrastructure for cars, now hydrogen might be a very good system to use for interstate trucking, right? Because the trucks go from one area to another. They know where they're going. They go to warehouses and stuff. They can have hydrogen supplies at the warehouses where they know end to end where they're going to land, how fast they can fill them up, right? And it's commercial, so it isn't like you got 8 million cars that have to always keep filling up with hydrogen. You have a limited amount of trucks from certain companies that could try it out. Big batteries are useless for semi-trucks because they weigh too much and they carry a lot of weight, and the more weight they carry, the bigger they have to be. It's kind of like a never-ending saga of chasing your own tail. And, people driving electric cars, they don't pull that much weight except themselves. They're not pulling 40, 50,000 pounds of delivery items. So you might be able to push batteries to a certain extent with electric cars. But the hydrogen fuel cell deal was better for big vehicles that are commercially done. And that makes sense. So Toyota's pretty much pulling the plug on, well, we're not really going to make any hydrogen fuel cell cars in the near future. It makes sense because there's no infrastructure. And if there isn't an infrastructure, there's no sense in building a vehicle like that. Everybody saw them, that had them, liked them, they loved them, but they said, where are you going to get the hydrogen from, right? Just like if they do get millions and millions and millions of electric cars with batteries in them, where's the electricity coming from? You know, that's bad enough. There already is at least an electrical infrastructure. It needs a lot of work, but it's there already, and the hydrogen infrastructure is almost zero. So in a sense, it makes logical reasons for Toyota to say, well, we'll kind of give up on hydrogen fuel cells. And of course, they made the biggest bet that's played off so far in that they didn't jump into battery electric cars like everybody else did in the beginning. They went to hybrids, and now they're selling the heck out of hybrids, and people are buying hybrids because it fits especially the American lifestyle, right? You can run on battery a little, but when you need to really get going, the hybrid gasoline engine turns on, and you don't have to have any range anxiety. You can go as far as you want. Well, if you've got a late model Acura RDX, well, guess what? You might end up having your rear window just shatter out of nowhere. I got this email from a guy who works at an Acura dealer, and he says, we get more and more of these new RDXs that come in with exploded rear factory glass. I'm waiting to see if there's a class action or a TSP recall. Unbelievable. And this is from a guy who works at an Acura dealer. Hey, I like that people send me this stuff. So even there, you know, they work there, but they're showing, hey, there's problems with this stuff. Something needs to be done. Send me the stuff that's going on so I can share it with everybody, you know? Because these companies, they're always going to say it's something else. When the plastic melts, they call it a thermal event. If the glass shatters, what are they going to say? Well, it was a small meteor that hit your car. I'm sorry, but we're not going to fix it. You know, I mean, they're always looking for some excuse because they didn't make something right, then it breaks, and they don't want to have to fix it for free. And in this case, the Acura RDX says, hey, the rear windows are shattering. This is just like a friend of mine who works at an Audi dealer said, Scotty, those 2.0T turbo Audi engines, we replace 8 or 10 of them every month because there's such crappy engines blowing up. You know, send it to me so I can share it with everybody. Now, here's an interesting Toyota invention. In the bed of your pickup truck, stuff's always moving around, right? It's a pain tying it down. Check out. Here's their idea. They have an idea that in a tonneau cover, there'll be a built-in bladder. And then when you put it down, you push a button and a little air pump will inflate the bladder so it will squash the things down and it won't move around. Pretty interesting idea. Now, they don't actually make them yet. As you can see in this picture, there's a little compressor and it blows up the bladder and then it seals it in place. And especially if you use your truck for, say, you're going on a vacation or something, right? And you got luggage. You don't want to put the luggage in with you in the cab and take up all that space. You'd rather have it in the back, but you don't want it moving around. Something like that, squashing it down. Hey, I wonder if they'll actually make them. You know, these are ideas that people get patents on. They say, here's our idea. They haven't actually made them yet for mass production, so if they do, hey, it'd be an interesting thing. Just instead of having to tie everything down, just push a button, the air holds it in place, and away you go. Hey, why don't we just get an air bladder, blow it up, hold things in place? Hey, it does make sense. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.